The planet was quiet now. Too quiet. Dust swirled in the ruined streets of the once great city, stirred only by the wind that whispered through broken towers and shattered glass. Captain Ilara Vey sat on a crumbling wall, her armor scorched and dented, her boots coated in ash. Her rifle rested across her knees, though she had no intention of using it again. Not today. Her unit had been gone for weeks. She had watched them fall one by one to the relentless machine army that had swept through the galaxy. There were no survivors, no reinforcements. The war had chewed through everything she loved, leaving her alone. The only thing left in her heart was exhaustion and a quiet, unshakable wish to die. Ilara had always been strong. Once, she had believed in honor, in duty, in fighting for something greater than herself. But months of endless conflict had eroded that belief. She had nothing to fight for anymore, nothing to live for. Her fingers hovered over the communicator strapped to her wrist. A final message, one that she hoped would never be answered, could be sent. It was more a farewell than a plea for help. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes, and whispered into the transmitter. "This is Captain Ilara Vey. If anyone is out there, I am done. Let this be my last signal." Silence answered. She expected silence. The universe had been silent for so long, and yet a crackling buzz interrupted the stillness. Her communicator vibrated. "Ilara Vey?" a voice called, smooth and oddly playful, cutting through the emptiness of the ruined city. Ilara froze. "Who is this?" Her voice was hoarse, brittle with fatigue. "Someone who refuses to let you disappear," the voice replied. "I'm Oren Cade, and if you're still alive, I've got a proposition. Stay alive long enough, and I promise you dinner." Ilara's brow furrowed. She blinked at the communicator, wondering if she had gone mad. A human voice, cheerful and flirtatious, in the middle of this wasteland? It had to be a trick. "This is not a joke," Oren said, as if reading her mind. "I'm not here for a battle report, not for extraction, not for any war games. I just think you should live. And if I have to flirt to make it happen, then I guess I'm stuck with that." Ilara's lips twitched. She wasn't sure if it was anger or the faintest stir of amusement. You're joking." "Am I?" Oren replied. His tone was serious yet playful. "I don't joke about dinner, or saving people who clearly want to be dead." Ilara wanted to hang up. She wanted to curse. She wanted to disappear into the rubble around her and finish what she had started. But something about the voice, its warmth, its certainty, kept her listening. She found herself telling him small things, things she wouldn't have shared with anyone else. "I lost my unit," she said quietly, staring at the crumbling skyline. "Everyone's gone. I don't see a reason to keep going." "I know what it's like," Oren said. "I've walked through battlefields too, but dying doesn't have to be the first choice. Not if you can survive even just a little longer, maybe for company." Ilara shook her head, trying to dismiss the ridiculous hope that crawled into her chest. Company? In this desolate place? She had learned long ago that company only ends in loss, yet she didn't disconnect. She couldn't. "Where are you?" she asked finally. "I'm on my way," he said. "I've got a small ship, nothing fancy, but it's fast. I'll be there before any of those drones even see me." Drones. She had almost forgotten the danger that still lurked around her. The war machines were not gone. They patrolled the ruins like ghosts, hunting for survivors. Ilara's instincts snapped back into place. She had to move. She couldn't just sit here and wait for a stranger to arrive. She packed her essentials, quickly. A few energy rations, a med kit, and her rifle. Her mind raced with doubts. Why should she trust him? How could she trust anyone? Yet deep down she felt a strange pull. Something about this Oren Cade made her want to see the world a little longer, even if just to meet him. As she moved through the rubble, avoiding patrol drones with careful, calculated steps, she realized something else. For the first time in months, her heart was not heavy with despair. It was lightened ever so slightly by the ridiculous hope that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to die here. The sun was setting when she reached the edge of the city. The horizon glowed red, painting the ruins in firelight. She scanned the skyline. And then she saw it, a small craft, sleek and surprisingly elegant, weaving through the dust like it belonged in the sky. Alara froze, not out of fear, but from disbelief. Could this really be real? Could someone really come for her in the middle of this forgotten world? "Hey," a voice called from the ship's intercom. "Over here. I promise. I only bite on the first date." Alara rolled her eyes but couldn't stop the corner of her mouth from lifting into a reluctant smile. She didn't know why she trusted him, or if she even did. But she felt for the first time in a long time a spark of something she had thought gone forever. "Fine," she muttered, standing tall despite her exhaustion. "But don't expect me to make this easy." Oren laughed. It was a sound full of warmth, bright and human, cutting through the cold shadow of the ruined city. "Wouldn't have it any other way, Captain. Now climb aboard. Let's see if I can convince you that the universe isn't done with you yet." Alara hesitated only for a moment. Then, with her rifle slung over her shoulder, she ran toward the ship, stepping into a future she hadn't dared to imagine. The winds of the ruined world whipped past her face, carrying dust and the faintest scent of hope. She didn't know what awaited her. Danger, death, maybe even more loss. But one thing was certain. For the first time in forever, she wanted to live. And somewhere in the back of her mind she thought she might even. The small ship hummed through the dusty skies, its sleek body glinting under the fading red light of the alien sun. Inside, Alara Vey sat rigid, her hands resting on her knees, her eyes scanning the horizon. She was trained to fight, to survive, to trust no one. But somehow she had climbed aboard this stranger's ship. Oren Cade reclined in the pilot seat, one arm lazily draped over the console, the other tapping a rhythmic beat on his leg. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his grin was as irritatingly confident as ever. "Relax," he said, noticing her tension. "I know what you're thinking. Who is this idiot, and why is he not dead yet?" Alara didn't reply. She didn't need to. She had been thinking it herself. He seemed almost too human for this world. Too alive. Too impossible. "I promise I won't shoot you," Oren added, sensing her suspicion. "Unless you try to throw me out of the airlock, then all bets are off." She rolled her eyes, but a faint smile tugged at her lips. She didn't know why she was smiling. Maybe it was the absurdity of it. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in weeks, someone was speaking to her like she mattered. Oren leaned forward, tapping a few buttons on the console. The ship shuddered as it changed course, dodging debris that floated like ghosts in the reddish haze. "So tell me," he said casually, "do you always greet strangers with a death wish, or am I special?" Alara gave him a side glance, her jaw tight. "I don't greet strangers at all," she replied. "Especially not the ones who flirt while flying through war zones." "That's fair," Oren said with mock seriousness. "But I have a talent for surviving against impossible odds. And apparently for flirting." She didn't respond, focusing on the alien terrain below. Cities lay in ruins, towers crumbled, streets twisted by explosions long forgotten. It was a graveyard of human ambition and machine conquest. Alara had walked these streets alone, each step a reminder of all she had lost. "You know," Oren said, "I've read reports about you." Alara finally looked at him, frowning. "Reports?" "Yeah. You're famous," he said, leaning back with a smug smile. "Not the kind of fame you'd want. But somehow you survived where everyone else didn't. You're the woman who almost single-handedly held the Northern Front for 48 hours. And yet, you sound like you want to quit." Alara swallowed. His words were accurate. She had survived when so many others had fallen. But what was survival if it only left you alone and hollow? "Survival isn't always winning," she muttered. "True," Oren agreed. "But surviving to laugh, to fight, or even to flirt, that's winning in my book. Speaking of which," he leaned closer, a teasing glint in his eyes, "if we survive this, You owe me a dinner, and no arguing. Alara narrowed her eyes at him. You really don't quit, do you? Not unless forced, he replied smoothly. And I have a feeling you're going to enjoy that dinner, whether you admit it or not. She shook her head, but didn't protest further. There was something about his presence that made her forget the cold shadow of the city below. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter, almost human again. The journey was not without danger. As they approached a narrow canyon, a patrol of enemy drones appeared, their metallic bodies glinting like sharp knives in the twilight. Alara's instincts kicked in. Drones, she muttered. We've got company. Oren's fingers danced over the controls. I see them. Don't worry. I've had a lot of practice dodging death. The ship weaved through the canyon, dodging the drone's energy blasts. Alara gripped the seat, her heart pounding. Even though she was alive, even though someone was here for her, the danger reminded her of everything she had fought against. Hold on, Oren called over the alarms. This is the fun part. Alara couldn't help but let out a short laugh, sharp and tense. Fun? You call almost dying fun? Absolutal the company of the man who hap. The stars stretched above them like silver threads on black silk, calm and endless. Inside the small ship, Alara Vey sat rigid, scanning maps of the region while Oren Cade navigated through asteroid fields with an ease that made her uneasy. She had survived countless battles, but somehow flying beside him through danger and near-death situations made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Cautious hope. Oren leaned back in his seat, one hand on the console, the other, resting casually. I hope you don't mind, but I've been thinking about our little adventure. Alara raised an eyebrow, not looking at him. I doubt I'll mind your plans for my death or kidnapping. He grinned. Neither. My plan actually involves you staying alive. And maybe, just maybe, helping me stop this war. Alara finally looked at him, skeptical. Stop the war? You have no idea what you're talking about. This isn't a game. It's not, Oren said. But I think humans have a special advantage. Our ability to adapt, to negotiate, to survive against impossible odds. You and I together, we might just have a chance. She sighed, her mind flicking to the ruined cities below, to the countless lives lost to machines that seemed unstoppable. I've seen what humans can do, she said quietly. And yet, most of the time, it's not enough. Too many die, too many worlds fall. Oren nodded, understanding her pain without pity. Exactly why we have to try something different, not with brute force but with wit, courage, and yes, a little charm. He winked as if that solved everything. Alara shook her head. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I'm tired, Oren. I'm not the hero you think I am. You're a hero whether you like it or not, he said, serious now. You survived battles I couldn't imagine. You've lost everything, and yet you're still alive. That's enough for me. Her heart clenched at his words. She had spent so long believing her life had no meaning, that death was the only release. And yet, here was someone who refused to let her give up, who refused to let her be alone. Oren tapped a few buttons and the ship hummed louder. I've arranged a meeting with a neutral faction on the edge of the sector. They've stayed out of the war so far. If we can get them on our side, it might just tip the balance. Alara frowned. You're serious? You want me to help you negotiate? I'm serious, and yes, I need your knowledge of tactics, your bravery, and, if I'm being honest, your stubbornness. She blinked. My stubbornness? Exactly. You refuse to quit. You survive when others wouldn't. That's exactly what we need. Besides, he added with a grin, I think it makes you charming. Alara groaned, turning back to the maps. You're impossible. Not impossible, he said gently. Invincible. But that's a story for later. They traveled in silence. For a while, the only sounds the hum of the engines and the occasional beep of sensors detecting distant objects. Alara's mind wandered to the enemy patrols they had avoided earlier. She knew this mission would not be simple, Neutral factions were unpredictable, and the enemy would likely pursue them relentlessly. "Captain," Oren said softly, breaking her thoughts. "You know you don't have to do this alone, right?" She stiffened. "I didn't ask for company." "No," he said, his tone firm but kind. "You didn't, but I offered it, and I won't take no for an answer." Her chest tightened. For months she had been alone. She had pushed everyone away, and yet, with him, she felt a strange trust she couldn't explain. The ship shuddered suddenly, jerking them both forward. Ilara grabbed a handhold. "What, now?" Oren's fingers flew over the controls. "Enemy drones. Small group. We can dodge them if we move fast." Ilara leaned forward, her instincts kicking in. "I'll handle the weapon systems. Guide me to the target." He handed her the controls for the ship's defensive systems. "Just like old times," he said, "but with less death this time, hopefully." Ilara's hands moved swiftly, directing automated turrets and firing countermeasures. Drones exploded in bright flashes of light against the dark void, and her heart raced, not with fear, but with the thrill of fighting for something bigger than herself. When the last drone fell, she exhaled, hands trembling slightly. Oren reached over and tapped her shoulder. "See? Nothing we can't handle together." She looked at him, finally letting a small smile escape. "You're really annoying." "And yet," he said, grinning, "you still saved me. I like that about you." Ilara turned back to the controls, but her mind wandered. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about death. She was thinking about strategy, about survival, about the man who had somehow made her care again. Hours later, the ship descended to a hidden landing zone on a rocky moon. The neutral faction's base was nestled within a canyon, its walls dotted with lights. Oren piloted them safely to the surface. "You ready for the big show?" he asked, eyes gleaming with excitement. Ilara nodded, adjusting her armor and checking her weapons. "I didn't come this far to back down now." "Good," Oren said, offering his hand. "Then let's go make some allies. And maybe, just maybe, we'll prove that humans, especially stubborn, beautiful humans, can change the course of a war." Ilara hesitated only briefly before taking his hand. It was a small gesture, but in that touch, she felt a connection she hadn't felt in years. She was no longer a soldier lost in despair. She was a fighter, and she was not alone. Together they stepped out of the ship, facing the unknown. Dangers lurked, negotiations awaited, and battles were yet to come. But Ilara felt ready, not just for the mission, but for the possibility that life could be more than pain and survival. And for the first time, she allowed herself to think. Maybe, just maybe, she could even enjoy the journey. The canyon air was thin, dry, and filled with the distant hum of machines. Ilara Vey followed Oren Cade as they approached the neutral faction's base. The walls of the compound were carved from the rocky cliffs, dotted with softly glowing lights that pulsed like watchful eyes. The calm exterior did little to ease the tension in her chest. Neutral factions were unpredictable. Some could be allies, others could turn on them in a heartbeat. Oren moved with casual confidence, hands behind his back, his steps echoing slightly against the stone. "Relax," he said, as if speaking to a child. "They've seen plenty of visitors today. But don't let the calm fool you. Everyone here has a little bite." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "I can handle a bite. I've survived worse." "Good," Oren said with a grin. "Because I plan on keeping you alive long enough to laugh at all of it." She shot him a sidelong glance. "You really don't quit, do you?" "I don't," he replied. "Persistence is one of my best qualities. Right after charm." Ilara shook her head, though the faintest smile tugged at her lips. She had to admit it. Oren's endless teasing, his playful tone, even in the face of danger, was oddly comforting. Somehow, it made the ruined world around them feel less like a graveyard and more like a challenge to overcome together. The doors to the compound opened, and they were greeted by the neutral faction's representatives. Three beings, humanoid but unlike any human she had seen. Their skin shimmered with a metallic hue, eyes glowing softly, and their movements were precise, almost mechanical. "Welcome, travelers," said the tallest one, voice smooth but emotionless. "State your purpose." Orin stepped forward, bowing slightly. "We come with a proposal. The galaxy is at war, and your neutrality could tip the scales. We ask for your cooperation, for a chance to prevent further bloodshed." Ilara stayed behind him, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her sidearm. Not because she intended to fight, but because she had learned to trust her instincts. Danger could arrive at any moment, and she would be ready. The representatives studied them, silent for a long moment. Then the shortest one spoke. "Words alone do not convince us. Actions speak louder. What proof do you offer that humans are capable of meaningful change?" Orin glanced at Ilara, his grin softening into something warmer. "Then allow me to introduce the person who can answer that better than I ever could." Ilara stepped forward, her boots clicking against the metal floor. She drew a deep breath. "I am Captain Ilara Vey," she said, voice steady. "I have survived battles that should have killed me. I have seen my comrades fall, and I have learned from every failure. Humans adapt. We survive. And when we are pushed to the edge, we fight not just for ourselves, but for each other." The representatives remained silent, but their glowing eyes flickered as if assessing her sincerity. Orin nudged her gently. "See, I told you, humans are amazing, and that's why I brought you." Ilara allowed herself a small, reluctant smile. His words were irritatingly true. They had come here seeking help, and she was their proof that humans were worth believing in. Before any further discussion could continue, an alarm blared through the compound. Red lights flashed, casting long shadows across the walls. The representative's eyes widened. "Enemy intrusion," the tallest said, voice urgent now. "They've tracked your ship." Ilara's heart sank. She had known this mission would not be easy, but she had hoped for a moment of calm, a chance to prove that negotiation could work. Instead, danger had arrived faster than expected. Orin's grin returned, sharper this time. "Looks like we get to show them what humans can really do. Shall we?" Without waiting for an answer, he led her toward a defensive position near the main gate. Drones and mercenaries began pouring in from the canyon entrance, their weapons glowing ominously in the dim light. Ilara's hands moved with precision, directing turret fire while Orin coordinated the Nayu. The night on the canyon moon was quiet at first, but the calm was deceiving. Ilara Vey stood at the edge of the compound, her armor dented, her boots dusty, her eyes scanning the distant horizon. She had survived countless battles, but tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air, a warning she could not ignore. Orin Cade approached her, moving with his usual casual confidence. "Something on your mind, Captain?" he asked, his voice light, but there was an edge of concern beneath it. Ilara shook her head. "I don't know if I can do this, Orin. We've fought, we've negotiated, we've survived, but the enemy is stronger than ever. And the stakes, they're higher than anything I've ever faced." He put a hand on her shoulder, firm but reassuring. "I know it's hard, but you're not alone. Not anymore. You have me, and you have your skills. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone who can't." She looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. For months, she had believed death was the only escape. And yet, standing here with him, she felt a spark of something new. Hope. A reason to fight, not for the war itself, but for the chance at life and maybe even something more. Before she could respond, alarms blared across the compound. The enemy had found them. Drones and mercenaries poured into the canyon, a relentless wave of steel and fire. The neutral faction's fighters rushed to defend the gates, but it was clear the battle would be overwhelming without skill and strategy. Ilara's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. "Orin, we need to coordinate the defense. Turrets, gates, and cover positions. We can't let them breach the inner compound. Orin nodded, his grin returning even in the chaos. Lead the way, Captain. I've got your back. And your humor too, if you need it. Together they moved through the compound, issuing orders and directing defenses. Ilara's tactical mind was sharp, analyzing enemy movements, anticipating their attacks. Orin's charm and quick thinking kept the neutral faction fighters organized, preventing panic from spreading. A group of drones broke through one of the outer gates. Ilara rushed forward, firing with precision, disabling them before they could harm anyone. Orin moved alongside her, using his agility to guide the fighters, keeping them alive and motivated. Amid the chaos, he shouted, "Captain, there's a breach on the eastern wall. We need you there now." Ilara sprinted toward the eastern wall, her breath heavy but her mind focused. She reached the breach just in time to see a mercenary firing at one of the neutral fighters. With a swift movement, she tackled him to the ground, disarming him and securing the wall. Orin arrived moments later, sliding into position beside her. "You make this look easy," he said, panting slightly. "I don't have a choice," she replied, scanning the horizon. "If we fail, everyone dies." The battle raged for hours, energy blasts lighting the canyon, shadows dancing across the walls. Despite the overwhelming odds, Ilara and Orin worked together seamlessly, their movements synchronized. They were not just fighting, they were inspiring others to fight alongside them. Finally, the enemy forces began to retreat. The remaining drones were destroyed, and the mercenaries fled into the canyon, leaving the compound intact. Silence fell, broken only by the labored breathing of those who had survived. Ilara sank to her knees, exhaustion hitting her like a tidal wave. Orin knelt beside her, placing a hand on her back. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it. Together." She shook her head, trying to catch her breath. "It's never enough. They'll be back. The war isn't over." "No," Orin agreed, "but we've bought time. Time to regroup, to strengthen, and to prove that humans can survive even the darkest moments. And time for you to decide what you really want." Ilara's eyes met his, filled with conflicting emotions. She had been running toward death for so long, believing it was her only escape. But now, standing here with him, she realized that her last wish might have been wrong. Perhaps she didn't want to die, perhaps she wanted a reason to live. Orin's voice was gentle. "Ilara, you've survived every battle, every loss. But this is the real choice. You can continue to fight for survival alone, or you can choose to fight for life, for hope, for something more than just the war." Tears pricked her eyes. She had spent so long believing life was only pain, only loss. And yet, here was a man who refused to let her give up, who refused to let her believe she was broken beyond repair. She began, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can be that person. I've seen too much, lost too much." Orin took her hands in his, holding them firmly. "You can, and you don't have to do it alone. I'll be with you, not just to survive, but to live, to find meaning again." Ilara's chest tightened. The choice was clear, but terrifying. She could continue down the path of despair, letting death claim her as she had once wished, or she could take a leap of faith, trusting someone else, trusting herself to live. Her hands squeezed his. I choose to live," she whispered. "Not for the war, not for the mission, but for hope. And maybe for you." Orin's grin returned, brighter than ever. "Good. Because my plan was never about the war. My plan was always a date." For the first time in years, Ilara laughed. It was shaky and raw, but genuine. Around them, the neutral faction fighters cheered, the danger momentarily forgotten. The war was far from over, but in this moment, victory was not just survival. It was a choice to embrace life again. Ilara looked at the stars above the canyon, letting herself feel the fragile, fierce joy of survival. She had chosen life, and, in doing so, she had found something she had long thought lost: hope, trust, and the possibility of something more. Oren squeezed her hands gently. "Tomorrow will be harder," he said. "But tonight we celebrate. Not just victory, but the fact that we survived. And we did it together." Ilara nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She had made a choice, and that choice had given her a reason to fight, a reason to live, and a reason to hope. And somewhere deep inside, she allowed herself to dream. Maybe this was the beginning of a new story, one where survival wasn't just about enduring, but about thriving. The night was alive with distant flashes of energy as enemy forces regrouped for one last strike. The canyon base had been quiet for days, but Ilara Vey knew the calm would not last. Her body ached from exhaustion, yet her mind was sharp, her resolve stronger than ever. She had made her choice: to live, to fight, and to hope. And nothing could break that determination now. Oren Cade stood beside her, leaning casually against a wall. His dark hair fell slightly into his eyes, but the confident grin remained. "You ready for the grand finale?" he asked. Ilara glanced at him, her lips twitching into a small smile. "I was born ready." "Good," he said, tapping the console. "Because this is it. One last push and then we can finally breathe." The enemy appeared on the horizon, a shadowy mass of drones and mercenaries, their weapons glowing like distant stars. The neutral faction's forces were ready, inspired by Ilara and Oren's previous victories. But even with their numbers, it would take more than courage to survive this battle. Ilara adjusted her armor, checked her weapons, and drew a deep breath. She had trained for years for moments like this, yet this was different. This wasn't just survival. This was fighting for a future, for life, and for the people who depended on them. Oren noticed her gaze. "You're thinking too much," he said lightly, though his eyes betrayed concern. "Trust me, you've got this, and I've got you." She shook her head, a determined glint in her eyes. "No, we've got each other." The battle began with a thunderous roar. Drones swooped down from the cliffs, firing energy blasts that illuminated the canyon in violent streaks of light. Mercenaries rushed forward, their movements coordinated and deadly. But Ilara and Oren moved with precision, their teamwork flawless. Ilara led the defensive line, her experience turning chaos into strategy. She directed turret fire, guided the neutral faction fighters to cover, and struck down enemies with pinpoint accuracy. Every move was calculated, every action saving lives. Oren flitted between positions, using his charm and quick thinking to boost morale, direct reinforcements, and distract enemy units. Even in the heart of battle, he remained playful, cracking jokes to ease tension. "You're ridiculous," Ilara shouted over the roar of weapons. "And you love it," he replied, grinning. A squadron of drones broke through the eastern flank. Ilara moved swiftly, taking cover behind a barricade as she targeted the incoming machines. Explosions rocked the ground, and sparks flew around her. Oren joined her, firing with calm precision. "You can't do everything alone," he called, diving to intercept a drone that had evaded her shot. "I don't want to do it alone," she shouted back, realizing she couldn't anymore. The idea of fighting for herself alone was hollow now. Every action she took had meaning because someone else counted on her. Together, they fought like a single unit, their strengths complementing each other. Ilara's skill and courage, Oren's quick thinking and charisma, inspired everyone around them. Slowly, the enemy began to falter. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last wave of drones exploded against the canyon walls, and the mercenaries retreated into the darkness. Silence fell, broken only by the labored breaths of those who had survived. Ilara sank to her knees, exhaustion heavy in her limbs. Oren knelt beside her, placing a hand. "One did it," he said quietly.